Never had to follow something like that before at TimesTalks. I kind of don't know what to do now. That was so great. Thanks everybody for coming through the rain. Thanks for being here with us tonight, and thanks for that incredible performance. The ways we're going to work, we're going to talk up here for about 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A from the audience. So if you've got questions, let us know. Hello to everybody watching us on Facebook Live. We'll take some questions from you too. But right now, I'd like to introduce Barry Jenkins.
Thank you.
Naomie Harris. And is Andre here? We have Andre Holland.
I just want to note that Tim Fain literally dropped the mic when he was done, which was pretty damn awesome.
It's all downhill from here, really. That's incredible. Wow. And let's start by talking about this incredible music because there's some exciting news. Is that you're putting together a full screening of the film, live orchestra, full length of the movie. You want to talk a little bit about what your hopes are for that and where that came from?
I mean, I live in LA, and that performance is happening in LA. Sorry, New York, but the performance has to come to me. I'm sorry. but Nick and I worked on the piece here in New York in his studio primarily. And then I wasn't here. He gathered all the session players and Tim and all those things. So I've never been in the room physically when it's been performed live. So it's just this wonderful treat to me. And as someone who in the writing of this film and the directing of it always saw it having, a score that could feature piano, violin, cello, and these things, it's just like everything's coming full circle or becoming whole in this way. So I'm really glad that we're able to put the screening and the performance together.
Yeah. And I heard backstage it might make it to New York at some point, right? There's no confirmation, but I'm a reporter and I dug in and I got a hint there. But in the full version of the score as well, one thing, quick question, how many people here have actually seen this great movie? All right.
Thank y'all.
So we don't need to do the plot summary, the IMDb blurb, okay? It's incredible, and the actual score, as you've seen the film, there's a lot of different textures that we're not seeing now, a lot of kind of processing. You want to talk about the whole scope of the soundtrack and what you were going for?
Yeah, so I'm from the South. People don't consider Miami the South, but it's the South. I actually lived in Tallahassee for 6 years, which is definitely the South. But I love this form of music called chopped and screwed, which is like this hip hop where you slow the music down, you alter the pitch, and alter the sort of the bass. It takes on this rumble. But this other thing happens where, in hip hop, the lyrics come at you at a certain BPM. I think when you chop and screw it, the lyrics are slowed down. You can actually hear what these primarily young men are saying. And there's a lot of yearning and hurt and loss and pain in the lyrics when you chop and screw it. So I listen to everything chopped and screwed. I got Solange chopped and screwed. I got Tame Impala chopped and screwed. Like if you look at my iPod, it's just chopped and screwed nonstop. And so when I first told Nick about this, Nick was like, I forget, we were at the Ace Hotel and we were talking, and I was like, you can't chop and screw an orchestra, can you? Or Nick was like, why can't you? And so it was one of these beautiful things where as the film goes on and the characters becoming more masculine or taking on these sort of markers of hyper-masculinity, the score, Tim's playing, Nick's playing, is also being chopped and screwed as well. And so we're taking the orchestra and filtering it through the same processing that the character is trying to filter his life through. So it was this really great thing, and everything in the movie and the score is analog. People are actually playing those instruments, but then we take them, we do a little something to it, or Nick does a little something to them. So.
And in terms of just, there's one thing to like that music, but another to think that it's right for this film, that it's suitable to the kind of the effect you're going for. What kind of makes sense in terms of what you're trying to bring out in these characters of slowing that down and chopping it and reprocessing that music?
Well, for me, it was more about necessarily the character, although I do think in this film it's meant to be immersive cinema. Things they come from the character out, and not from outward in. But I love the idea that the world the characters live in is merging, with the aesthetics of the film. I like to say my filmmaking voice was developed in the last 15 years of my life. My actual personal voice is rooted in the place you see in the film. I think the score is one of those places where we do a great job of merging those two voices, which was my whole goal in creating the piece. So.
Well, I gotta say, it's for me as a reporter, it's really fun when you catch a film and it's in that runaway train moment, where, the first time I saw this film was early press screening and nobody knew that people were gonna embrace it as much as they did. We didn't know that Tony Scott was gonna rave about the film at the New York Times. I'll read a section from his review. He said, you could say, I've seen these people before, but you've never seen these people with their humanity brought to the fore, with their beauty as well as their suffering and their trouble and their failures emphasized with such clarity and such generosity. And obviously that's just one of many raves. I mean, I wrote about Mahershala, profiled him. The Still Processing podcast we have spent a whole episode on the film. It's the amount of energy this film has generated has been incredible, and the last 24 hours have been pretty decent for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we're quite fortunate, that's for sure.
Yeah. Gotham Awards last night. This film took home Best Picture, Screenplay, Ensemble, and Audience Award. And today, I'm not done. Today, Naomie took home Best Supporting Actress, the National Board of Review. And Barry wasn't done. He picked up Best Director. This doesn't happen a lot for a film, with a $100 million budget and a terrific A-list director and terrific A-list. All the elements can be in place, and this doesn't happen a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm not A-list, but these guys are A-list in my book. You know, I have friends who've made films that are wonderful, just absolutely amazing, that nobody sees, you know, for one reason or another. So I just feel so fortunate that people are seeing this film, you know, and that people are telling their friends, telling their family to go see the film. So it's been an amazing journey. I will say, I take trains a lot, bruh, and I ride coach. So whatever train we're on, you know, it's not the fancy train.
Yeah. But you know, I want to ask the two of you, when you signed on to do this film, this wasn't Barry Jenkins, director who won Best Director at National Board Review. This is Barry Jenkins, whose first film cost $15,000, had great reviews, but this was not a sure thing that you were signing up and going to get this kind of attention off of this film. What brought you into the project in the beginning?
Yes, what brought you into the project in the beginning?
For me, it was the script. And you're right, none of us expected this kind of response at all. But that's not why we did it. You know, we read this material and it so deeply moved me and it moved everyone that became part of it that we just wanted to dive in and, you know, and tell this story because I think it has such a beautiful message and I think it's a message that's needed now more than ever. And it's really powerful, and it's one of those movies, one of those very, very rare movies, in fact, that has the ability to really change how people see life and see other human beings. So that's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah, likewise. How y'all doing? This is so cool. So cool to be here. Likewise, I would say, I mean, the story, the script off jump was like out of this world. And then also, I'm a very good friend of the playwrights on whose original material the film is based. And so I've known about it and done a lot of his work, and so that was a part of it. And then I also cheated a little bit because this man came very highly recommended from a director that I was working with at the time, Mr. Steven Soderbergh, who has been singing his praises for a long time. And so, you know, those three things together made it an easy yes. Plus, he's a cool brother, so.
Let's begin with the play, because it wasn't just a play. It wasn't like they were saying this has been on Broadway and got great reviews. Now we're going to make a film of it. This is an unproduced play that was in some ways unproducible, right?
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you said unproducible. I think when Terrell wrote this, he wrote it in 2003. He was an acting fellow at DePaul University, and he was applying to Yale School of Drama. And he had to, you know, create a writing sample. And so Terrell, being Terrell, instead of doing one, he wrote 3 writing samples, which is why he got into Yale. And this piece called "In Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue" was one of them. And I think it was never really meant to be a play. I like to describe it when I first read it as halfway between the stage and the screen. And for 10 years, you know, nothing happened with it. And mutual friends of ours in Miami at this festival called the Borscht Film Festival, which was this group of Miami kids who wanted to get people who maybe would move to LA or New York to come back to Miami and tell Miami stories. And so they read Terrell's piece and was like, oh man, this isn't about you, but it's about you. And what they meant was both Terrell and I, our moms, we were born pretty much the same time, grew up like blocks from one another, which is some of the same schools, and both our moms went through the struggle with crack cocaine addiction that Naomie depicts in the film. And that was cooked into the original piece. Terrell wrote it after his mom passed away in 2002. And so when it came to me, I was like, oh, this is kind of rich, and it's set in this place that I know very well. And we talked about it for 4 or 5 months, and then Terrell became a MacArthur genius. And when you are a MacArthur genius, you don't have time for dudes who make $15,000 films, only because, you know, his work was just exploding. But we had this series of conversations for about 4 or 5 months. And so once we both realized Terrell was too busy, you know, to do the adaptation, you know, I wanted to preserve his voice by having him extend the piece, continue it. He said, no, I trust you, you know, go forth. I understand what you want to do. And so it was like a baton was passed to me, and I just took it the rest of the way.
You know, knowing that personal experience is at the root of the characters you're playing, how did that change your approach to it? Are you coming back to him with questions about the role, about playing Paula?
No, you know, one of the weird things about this whole process, and one of the things that I've loved most about working with Barry, is that he gives his actors such tremendous freedom. And you see that when you watch the movie as well, that, you know, he allows the actors the time and the space to really perform and find themselves on screen. And he does that to you as an actor as well, because, you know, he knows that I'm incredibly clean living. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't even like drink coffee. So I am as far from a crack addict as you can possibly get, really. And still, despite that, he just handed me this role and he left me to my own devices to kind of just get on with it. And I did ask Barry, actually quite recently, like, how comes you trusted me? How comes you didn't like interfere with my whole process? And he said, well, you had as much at stake as I do, so I trust you. And that's really liberating for a performer if you feel as though your director feels that, yeah, you can manage this material on your own, but he's there as a safety net. So I didn't really, you know, pester Barry with loads of questions at all. We didn't really have much contact at all until I got to set.
Had you ever considered writing about your own mother?
I did, and then I shelved it. I thought, oh, that's way too personal. And so when Terrell's piece came to me, I thought, oh, this is great. It's not personal at all. It's about him. You know? But then it was, my producer, Ade, likes to say, I tricked myself, because then like 2 months into writing it, I was like, oh no, this is definitely all about me. And Terrell's off, you know, with his plays to the public and whatnot. So now I can't hide behind him anymore. And so in a way, I kind of like backed into writing about my mom, you know. And you know, you write a film 3 or 4 times. You know, you write at the script stage, directing. I think Naomie and I really wrote the character on set, and then you write it again in post. And at each of those stages, it got more and more personal. So.
And Naomie, I've read that you said, you know, you pushed back against people who said, you know, these kind of stock roles. The idea of like playing a crack addict in a film wasn't something that appealed to you. But you did say yes to this one. What was the difference here?
The difference was because Barry asked me to play his mum, basically, and I thought, how can I say no? And I also thought, therefore, here is somebody who's invested in ensuring that this kind of role doesn't become a stereotype. And by that, I meant I just felt like so often when you have a crack addict portrayed, that this person becomes just their addiction and they lose their humanity and their full complexity. And I thought, here's someone who's going to allow me to explore all of that and make sure that that I find as a person, you know, playing this role, that I can have compassion for her journey, and therefore the audience can as well. That's what was important to me.
We have a clip that we can show you, a little scene, Naomie.
Surprise!
It's all good.
Got the fucking car.
Calm down.
You shut the fuck up. What's wrong with you?
Who the hell you think you is? Huh?
Bitch, get the fuck out of here.
Well, so you gonna raise my son now? Huh? You gonna raise my son? Yeah. That's what I thought.
You gonna raise him?
You gonna keep selling me rocks? Huh? Motherfucker. Don't give me that you gotta get it from somewhere, shit nigga. I'm getting it from you. But you gonna raise my son though, right? Hmm? You ever see the way he was?
You watch your damn mouth.
You gonna tell him why the other boys kick his ass all the time? Huh? You gonna tell him? You ain't shit.
One thing I love about this script is that all of the characters change. Like, she's not just in this place for the whole film. You know, you meet her at a much earlier stage. In the middle section, she's in one other place in her life, and at the end, there's such a redemption, not even. It's great to see the freedom you give these characters, not just the actors to perform, but the characters to change. And I think that happens with Kevin, happens with Chiron, sometimes dramatically. Yeah. I'm wondering for all three of you, kind of what in this film jibes with your sense of how people change in the real world?
So much time passes between each chapter of the film, and the movie's inherently intersectional. And for me in Terrell, one of those sections was about how the world shapes these people who grew up in the world Terrell and I grew up in. I can only speak for the couple blocks Terrell and I grew up in, blah blah blah. But in those blocks or in that community, the world is very aggressively projecting all these things, onto young men, onto young women. And so for me, inherently, as we move through time, the characters have undergone a lot of change. What I love about the performances in the film is that rather than telling you what that change is or how that change transpired, you can feel that change in the embodiment of the characters. And it's interesting because we do it two different ways. With Naomie, who's very, very skilled, we have the same person physically embodying the same character who's going through a metamorphosis. With the other characters, Kevin and Chiron, we're literally changing the body of the young man. And I was just really, it was a point of interest, point of fact, a point of distinction for me to really put a stamp on the idea that the world is dictating, mandating, deciding, what is wrong, what is right, what is the proper presentation of masculinity, what is the wrong presentation of masculinity. So.
I'm still thinking about the question, man. That's a really interesting one. It's good. I think it's funny, man. I'm working on a play right now, and one of the lines in the play that I was thinking about today is a character says, and I'm gonna misquote it, but something to the effect of, if you find yourself in a treetop, the only thing to do is to jump down. He said, but before you jump, you got to figure out how you got there in the first place. Were you going up looking for some apples, or were you chased up by a bear? Because when you hit the ground, you might have to start running, And in some ways, that I think applies to this, For Kevin anyway, I feel like it's not until he's able to get out of that treetop and to get some perspective on his circumstances and on his life that he's able to kind of unpack for himself how he wound up there in the first place, And I think that even though this movie isn't directly, it's not documentary in the sense that it doesn't try to sort of say, well, this is how these people ended up in these circumstances. What I love about it is that there are characters who get to kind of speak about the circumstances, from a really personal point of view and kind of shed a little bit of light on it. So for me, that's how the characters change as well. Some distance gives them the sort of time and space to change, which is not something that everybody in these kind of worlds get.
Did you find yourself, with your character in particular, did you find yourself, he's changed so much between the second and the third part of the film, and there's a lot that we don't see, and we kind of have to, catch up with and use our own kind of empathy to imagine how he got where he is. How detailed did you get about trying to figure out where he had been in between those two sections? Did Barry break it down for you and say, this is where he's been, this is what he's been doing? Or you just had to play him as he existed?
Yeah, Barry kind of leaves us to our own. Yeah, lets us make our own bed, and then we got to lay in it. But yeah, I did do quite a lot.
But I'm there to pull the covers over you, bro.
Pull the covers over, tuck me in.
Tuck you in.
Yeah. Sing me a little good night song. No, man, but yeah, I definitely wanted to detail the events that led up to him coming back. I think the major thing for me was that he was living with an overwhelming guilt and shame, that drove him back to Miami, back to Chiron, basically. Yeah, but filling in the blanks is definitely a big part of the work. Yeah.
I'm talking about these roles. There's kind of roles that men play, in regular life, kinds of certain types of mass or masculinity you adopt. And these are guys that seem to be choosing from a relatively limited palette, right? I'm interested in what do you think was at stake for these young men making those choices along the way? What options are they choosing from?
Well, I think in some ways, and again, I'm only speaking of the world Terrell and I grew up in, the performance of masculinity can be the difference between life and death, there's a way a man looks at another man. There's a way a man doesn't look at another man. You know, these are things that are projected onto people who grow up in the place Terrell and I grew up in, and they can sometimes literally be the difference between life and death. And so the very small beats, you know, these things, the transformations that are happening and the choices that are being made, but they have grave consequences, or they can have grave consequences. I think all these guys who played the roles understood that, and they brought this thing to life that wasn't always verbose, you know, it wasn't always spoken, but you could feel it.
This, you know, and I feel like this idea that there are these boogeymen out there, or these types that we're navigating. You were talking about at a time like this, a film like this seems important, and I was thinking on the way over here, it must be so odd to be releasing this film this fall, here having a presidential candidate talk about the inner city and being a law and order president and the kind of tropes that get trotted out one after the other. Does it make you think about the value of a film like this in a different way?
You guys want that one? I mean, you know, I don't know about that. You know, I have a couple of different thoughts on this. You know, one of those thoughts is I never imagined this film would play at the same time where the president-elect was the president-elect, but that's neither here nor there. On the other hand, you know, I went 8 years without making a film, or 8 years between films. I could have gone 9 years, I could have gone 10 years, I could have gone 11 years. And I'm on social media, I get all these messages on Twitter and especially Instagram. And people have, in the last like 10 days, been saying to me over and over again, I'm so glad this movie exists right now. You know, this is where I went to, you know, when I need to go someplace to find some semblance of the world I feel like I'm living in, or the world I want to live in, a world that embraces diversity, embraces different, embraces otherness. So, and I think if I hadn't made the movie at the time that we made it, it would not be there for these last 10, 14 days for people who need to see themselves, who need to see something that reminds them of the possibilities inherent in the American dream. They're finding that thing in this film. I would never have tried to put that in the film. I made this movie for an audience of two, myself and Terrell, in the 4 or 5 blocks that we grew up in. But I think in doing that, people can see. You can come through these 4 or 5 blocks and still make something that people can empathize with and see themselves in.
Do you have thoughts about? I mean, you know, I feel like I've got friends lately who are talking about, like, I don't know what I'm doing being a dentist, you know, or I don't know what I'm doing this. Why? Maybe I should change. I should figure out a way to make my life more meaningful right now. And I just wonder if being in the arts, you know, this is something I think we'll be talking about a lot for years to come, and we've talked about it in years past. But does it change your sense of perspective in terms of what the arts can do?
I mean, I think I've always kind of hung my hat on the hook that the arts can have an impact and can change people. That opening people's eyes to the truth is a big part of our mission as artists. This year, I feel somewhat conflicted about it because I'm not sure that people want to see the truth or accept the truth. I think we still have to keep fighting, though, and keep telling these stories, right? I'm not sure what other choice we have, but what do you think, Nate?
I think one of the most beautiful things about art is that it is predictive a lot of times. Like, you know, it seems like, why was this movie made now? Why was it released now? It doesn't seem to all make sense, but I think there's a grand master plan. I always believe that, and I feel as though things transpire at precisely the point that they are needed. And I think this movie is at the perfect moment in time, and we desperately need art that speaks to people in this way, because it's speaking to people in a very particular way, because it's not speaking, it bypasses the intellect and goes straight to the heart, which is actually where real change is effected. And I think that's why it's more powerful than most.
I would just love to talk about, like, beauty in general, right? We just heard this beautiful music here. And you know, I feel like in the annual cycle of films coming out, we see a lot of, you know, issue movies, problem movies. We see dark dramas. We see neorealist films that are often like kind of grungy and jittery. And it is definitely not the approach of this film, which is just gorgeous. And I'm wondering how you, as a director, in terms of conceiving of this project, you decided to kind of push for these beautiful moments.
Yeah, you know, I would love to take credit for it, but I can't. You know, Terrell and I grew up in a very beautiful place, you know, and despite the fact that we lived what might be described as grungy lives, you know, shit was tough, but we were surrounded by beauty. You know, you could smell the ocean in the projects. You know, There was grass everywhere, big sky. The Polk Beans or Liberty Square, the projects that Naomie lives in the second story. Beautiful colors, all these gorgeous pastels. And the cinematographer and I, this guy James Laxton, who I've known since film school, shot my very first student film, and hopefully will shoot more feature films for me. We talked about it, and we were like, this isn't neorealism. The subject matter might lean itself to neorealism, but it's not. Terrell describes Miami as a beautiful nightmare, and to have tried to subdue that beauty, in the service of some sort of assumed aesthetic type of theme, would have been immoral, because that's not the way we grew up. We grew up in a beautiful fucking place, and so we wanted to have pictorially, a beautiful film that could relate to you guys the beauty of growing up in Miami despite abject poverty. So.
It's so romantic. The last bit of the film, we've got another clip to show. This is just such a lovely romantic scene in the car.
I need to know, which clip are we watching?
From the car.
Prep
Kevin
me.
and Chiron in the car. You want to set it up?
No, you did all the setting up,
There
right?
we go. We'll take a look.
So, Chiron. What you looking at me like that for? What, man? Come on, you just drove down here? Yeah. Like you was just on one, and you hit the highway. Yeah. So where you gonna stay tonight, man?
So by the way, I've got to say, Nicholas Britell made that chop of Classic Man, just so you know. The same guy playing piano made that chop. I didn't want to make a movie about the subject matter that didn't have overt sensuality, Once the characters are adults and they're sitting in that diner, the movie becomes, hell, when Trevante has that dream, the movie becomes inherently sensual, I was saying before, there's a way a man looks at another man, there's a way a man does not look at another man. It's like, fuck it, in this movie, men are gonna look at each other as though they desire each other. And by the time we get to the third story, we lean into that sensuality. So I love watching that scene between Andre and Trevante for a couple reasons. I went and saw this Kerry James Marshall piece at the Met today. Wonderful exhibition. You guys should go check it out. And when we cast Trevante and Ashton and Alex, they have this very deep, dark skin. And I was like, I want that skin to shine. I want it to glisten. I want it to reflect the way I grew up, where people's skin was moist. And, and that moisture to me reflects life. The body's replenishing itself. It's pushing out things. And the skin is supple. And so whenever I watch that scene, I see the way these two dudes look at each other, and I see Trevante's skin just fucking glowing, as it should, This was a no powder show. It was like jojoba oil and all, everybody got greased up. It was amazing. We were spraying people and oiling them down, man. Which, Derek could tell you, so I went to film school with this dude. You don't do that. You put powder on everybody. I was like, no. Don't dull the skin. Shine the skin, It's got to reflect and refract the light,
I love that. The last 5 seconds of that, when you say, "Where are you sleeping tonight?" and just pause, and there's a little look off to the side, hiding the smile. It's just such a lovely moment. What were you thinking in that moment?
All right, wait. I have to reveal a secret. That was the first scene that Andre and Trevante shot together. They met each other like a half an hour before that in the trailer. Now, Trevante had heard Andre's voice, because Andre did us a big solid when we record the phone call where Trevante's sitting on the bed, he's in the restaurant. We did Trevante's side like a week before, and Andre is actually on the phone. It's the first time Trevante heard his voice. And then that scene is the first time they meet. And so, bruh, I took my hat.
Yeah. No, man, I was thinking about string theory. Yeah.
I think.
Cool.
question, which I think is interesting. Why was the film told in 3 acts? Like, aside from the fact that that's the way it was written and originally.
No, it wasn't actually. Originally, Terrell's piece was sort of circular. It kind of jumped. You would see Little wake up, see Chiron wake up, then see Black wake up. Then Little would go to school, Chiron would go to school, Black would go to the corner. And it just kept going through this 24 hours, all three at a stage, all three at a stage. I was like, I don't know if an audience can follow that. I'd seen this film called 3 Times by Ho Xiao Shin, which is about a couple, takes place in 3 different time periods, played by the same 2 actors, but the relationship was contextualized by the time period it's set in. I think it goes 66, 1906, and then 2006. And I thought, that gave me a really broad spectrum or sort of impression of what that relationship is like. And so I thought, we'll pull the character apart and we'll tell his story in 3 phases, Instead of telling 80 beats in 100 minutes as a coming of age tale, we'll do 6 or 7 beats, but those beats will be really important. And in doing that, we would create the space where you would see how the world is shaping these young men, and you'd see it more or less in real time.
A question about moving from Act 1 to Act 2, when Juan just disappears, and it took me a while.
Spoiler!
They've all seen it. Why? And it's not a big deal. There's a friend who kind of makes fun of him because of it, but it's not a major kind of plotty point. But the ripple effect is there. Why play that so sly?
It wasn't about playing it sly. The movie's meant to be immersive for the audience, and it's meant to be driven by the consciousness of the character of Chiron, and not necessarily by the linearity of the plot. And so I think at some point, like many of these young men who grew up in the place Terrell and I grew up in, Chiron came home, and he was like, "Where's Juan?" And Juan was just gone, just snatched up at a moment's notice. And I wanted the audience to have the same feeling. Where's Mahershala? Where's Juan? Mahershala, Juan is gone, just snatched up at a moment's notice. You have to get on with life. You have to continue with the story. The same way at some point, Little had the same experience, It's like Eisenstein, the information is in the cut. And I have faith that people watching the film would catch up and would feel the same thing that I think a character, a person like Chiron, like myself or Terrell would feel. Because the character Juan is based on a real drug dealer in Terrell's life growing up in Liberty City, who took him under his wing and at a moment's notice was just snatched out. And so I wanted to relay that same feeling to the audience.
And I realize you're the only person in the cast that acts with all 3 Chirons. And you did it sometimes on the same day, right? There's consecutive days of shooting, and you're moving from time periods, and you're acting opposite the same character, but 3 different actors, and doing it like you do in this film. How does that? I mean, is there a more disorienting experience you can have, or
No, I think that's about as disorientating as it can possibly get, to be honest.
Were you disoriented, my dear?
Not at all, actually, Barry.
But how do you make it work? How do you find the truth in each scene, moving from such different kind of characters you're reacting to?
It's actually, You're
just a pro.
No, but you have to be just rooted in your character, and you have to know your arc. But that's true of any journey that you approach as an actor. So actually, it's not that different. And acting with the different actors was really easy because they are brilliant. I mean, even like Alex Hibbert, who is 11 years old and has never acted before and is like the consummate professional. He's extraordinary. He really is. So, and they were all like that. They were all incredible. So they made my job really easy.
Yeah. And I have to say I have to praise you a bit because Naomie came to set the day Spectre opened on like 4,000 screens, and we have 1 trailer for all our actors. And I remember the first scene we shot with her was in story 2, where Chiron comes home from Teresa's, and she comes around the corner. She's like, "Hey, where'd you go last night?" And then she says, "But I'm your mama, ain't I?" So we shoot that scene. It's the first scene Naomie does. I mean, I think that's the first time we physically met in person. No, we met the day before. We went to Wardrobe. And only because Naomie tells the story of the wardrobe, the makeup, the AD, who else? Like everybody being in one trailer. And so she's in there.
1 makeup stool as well, which we shared.
It was amazing. And so she's in this neighborhood that I grew up in, and we're doing this scene. And the beauty of working with Naomie, which I give you so much credit, was I couldn't be fully professional because she's basically embodying my mom and doing a damn good job of it. But it's creating things aesthetically that I can't anticipate. You know, I'm now watching a scene, I'm not professional, I'm going, oh, this isn't going far enough. I'm not feeling what I felt. And so I turned to her and I said, can you do a take of this? Don't know the woman. It was like, we just met, you know, she's here, she's a trooper. I'm like, would you mind doing one looking right into the camera? It's the first time we did it. And she goes, yeah, of course, Barry. I did it all the time with Danny on 28 Days. I was like, yes, like for Danny on 28 Days. And so we set the camera at 48 frames. And the reason why I asked for it was I felt like this was the first time that Chiron was seeing that his mom could become this other person. And for me, that was an out-of-body experience. So I wanted to take you guys and put you into his body to feel the out-of-bodiness of it. And so we shot it at 48 frames, and I thought, I'll just get the line, but I'm your mama, ain't I? Looking right in the camera. And then she kept going. And James, my cinematographer, who I've known since I was 20, he kept going. And she turns and walks to the front door, and he walks with her, and I'm like, oh shit, we got a movie, you know? Because then we turned around and we did the same thing with Ashton Sanders, who plays Chiron, and who was very warmed up at that point. You know, he had been working like a week and a half, and he did the same thing, and I thought, oh, now I'm in this character, you know? Now you guys will be in this character. And I give you all the credit in the world for just rolling with the punches. Rolling with the punches, my dude.
This is one of our Facebook Live comments, for, questions for all of y'all. What surprised you the most during this process of filming? Were there surprises when you got on set, or did you know what you were getting into?
I was, I think on day 3, we shot the scene where Little asked the question, you know, what's a faggot? And I'm on Facebook Live, I'm just throw it out there. And it was day 3 of production. Alex has never acted before, it's Chanel's first time. And then we have Mahershala. And we got there, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be incredibly difficult. And it was for about 30 minutes. Because then I thought, oh, why am I applying this pressure? Don't anticipate this being difficult, rely on your training. You know? Stay in the master, stay in the master, stay in the master. And the more comfortable I got, the more I settled down, the more they settled down. And then here's this kid who's 11 years old, never acted before, and he just owned it. You know, once he saw the space was there for him to own it, he just owned it. And, you know, Alex is like this, Mahershala's like this. And I have never seen a little boy make a grown man cry the way he made Mahershala cry on that set. And so that was the only thing that was, it wasn't surprising in the sense, I think, of the way the question is framed. It was that I hadn't done it in a while, and I had to like get to this point where I was like, oh yeah, trust yourself. You haven't done it in a while, but you can do this, you know? You have done it before, you know, and you were doing it now.
How about when you saw the film, when you saw the final cut, was there anything that surprised you in the final cut?
Wow.
Was there anything that surprised you in the final cut?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things that surprised me. The portraits that you do surprised me. The music like took my breath away, you know. I knew you were up to something. I knew you guys were, but I didn't quite know what it was gonna be. That surprised me. Everybody's performances surprised me. The kids, all of it really. Because, you know, we worked, I never met any of the other actors, any of the other Kevins or any of the other Chirons or anybody. It's just me and Travante, you know. So I had no idea what the rest of the film looked like. He wouldn't let us see any of it. While you were tucking me in at night, you could have shown me something. But no, but the whole thing was really, it continues to surprise. Every time I see it, I'm continually surprised by it.
I was surprised most during the filming because everyone had said, you know, you're going to Liberty City. It's one of the most deprived neighborhoods in the United States, and there's got to be police there, and it's going to be really unsafe, and all of this. And then when we get there, I have never experienced any location that has felt more welcoming and more inviting. It really felt as though the people there wanted us there, and they were hungry to have their story told, and they were so respectful of the filming process. Like, I'm used to filming in places where people like turn their music up when they know that, you know, people have shouted action because they want to be paid like $50 or $100 to turn their music down. And here, people were like respectfully crossing the road away from filming, so as not to disturb us. They were really behind the project, and you really felt that love and that support, actually. And I think you see it in the finished product in the film.
I wanted to ask you, you all kind of a question about the New York Times review of the film, which is just flat out rave by Tony Scott. I mean, just couldn't be a more positive review. But he brings up a point that I just think is fascinating. He said, talks about being sort of wary of the faint praise of universalism. This idea that, to insist that stories are about poor, oppressed, or otherwise marginal groups of people are really about everyone, that can be a way of denying their specificity. In other words, like, your story is only worthwhile as long as it tells me something about myself, kind of. I wonder if that rings true to you, or what you think about that take on this film. That there are...
That's heady, bro. That's real heady. I mean, you unpack that one, and you keep unpacking and unpacking and unpacking. What I think of when I hear that is the idea of, one, I don't think of myself as someone who is impoverished or in this or in that. I'm a human being. I just grew up in a certain context or certain conditions. But what I love about that quote that Tony said, I think it's not necessarily about us. It's more about the audience, and it's about not shortchanging the audience. I don't think there's a presumed universality of the film in the sense that it relates to everyone. I don't think that's the case. I think because Terrell and I are two black boys from one black neighborhood, from a few black blocks, with moms who went through a certain ordeal, somebody in Boise, Idaho, or Fresno can go, oh, I'm somebody from 2 square blocks, from this sort of place. And my mom went through this sort of ordeal. They're not the same, but if your story is distinct and unique, so is mine. I think that's where the universality comes from. It's not about it being relevant to everyone. It's about it being relevant to the one, I think people see the film and they can see something about themselves, not something about everyone, So I think universality, you kind of flip it and turn it inside out and make it about specificity, a one-to-one specificity.
Either of you have thoughts about that tension?
Come on, string theory. Because I've been thinking about that because, I don't read too many of the reviews because, I went through that with my first film and it can get painful. But I did an interview with Tony and Telluride, and so I was curious what he was going to say. And then when I saw somebody tweeted that he watched it 3 times, I was like, oh shit, I need to see what this dude has to say. And it was a very passionate review. I think he put himself into the review, which is all you can ever ask for. That element of it is really complex, and I'm still unpacking it to this day. That's why I love doing Q&As. I'll hear something here from someone on Facebook Live or in the audience that will illuminate something for me in my own work, which is a blessing.
And we're going to take some audience questions. We'll have, I think, some microphones set up on either side of the outside of the aisles. We'll take as many as we have time for, so you can line up, and I'll call on you in a second. I wanted to ask you just in general, we're in this moment where there are a lot of black filmmakers and a lot of black talent doing great work right now. You've been a programmer at Telluride, and you've seen these waves come before. I remember interviewing Spike Lee and him saying, well, they're always saying that every 5 years, and then there's another Oscar whiteout year. Is there something different about this moment that you think is going to be an opportunity for black storytellers to be a sustained presence rather than a wave that comes and goes?
Yeah, I don't know. I was a baby when when the first wave came through, or maybe the second wave, I should say, which is like Spike and John Singleton and the Hughes brothers and Benny Boom and all those folks, and Hype. And I feel like there was this thing, I love Spike because Spike carried a lot of weight. People would say, oh, what do you think Moonlight says about the black experience? Not much. It says a lot about me and Terrell's experience, in the sense that we're black men, it's depicting that very finite version, of what a version of the black experience is. I feel like when Spike was doing his thing, he had to carry that weight for all of us, I'll give an anecdote. I lived in the Bay Area for 8 years, and then I moved to LA, and I made this film while I was living in LA. I went back to LA from Miami, and we had a rough cut screening. And the first rough cut screening, and there was a list for the attendees of this rough cut screening. I looked at it, I was like, there are some folks who need to be on this list who are not on this list, and y'all know what I'm talking about. And so I thought, who can I call? And I had just moved to LA, and like within 18 hours, 36 hours, Terrence Nance was there, Justin Simeon was there, Khalil Joseph was there, Anye was there, Tahir Jeter was there. Rada Blank was there. It's like all these people, 12 p.m. in the afternoon on a Tuesday, showed up to watch a rough cut of my movie. I think that kind of support exists right now. And everybody in that group, Ryan came down a week later and watched it. In the middle of writing Black Panther, came down to watch my movie and give me very good notes, by the way. And I think all those people are creating this work that, to me, is addressing these very finite depictions or versions of the Black experience. And as a whole, we're all creating, adding patches to this quilt. And it's a very beautiful thing, All these movies that are being framed as a response to Oscar So White, those movies started, this one started 3.5 years ago. Some of those started 4.5, 5 years ago. Hell, some of them started 8 years ago. And they started as a response to something that people actually felt, the lack of these voices, of these stories. I think it's beautiful that they're all arriving at this time when they can be framed, very loudly, as a response to this thing that happened a few months ago. But that's not the case. And I do think we'll be here next year and the year after. And people, I'm looking out in this room, people from very diverse backgrounds, they're all going to get out there and tell their damn stories, And you guys are going to go out and watch them because you appreciate people telling their stories, right? Yes.
We'll do a question. How about over here?
Hi, Barry. Sliver of a question for you, which is, you mentioned how this is an immersive cinematic experience, and I'd love to hear just a tiny bit more about how you and James planned your shots and framing. I was blown away from the first shot, I think, of this tight crop and this shallow depth of field that continues throughout the entire film is not just beautiful, but really kind of solitudinous. So I'd love to hear a bit more about your framing choices in the cinematography.
Yeah, so myself and James Laxton, again, we've known each other for a long time. His wife is the producer on the film, who also went to school with us. So we spent a lot of time together just talking about like geeky-ass film shit. And with this film, a couple choices we made right at the very beginning. We wanted to shoot in anamorphic lenses, true anamorphic lenses, to get sort of like the aberrations you get outside the center of the frame. We knew we wanted to mat at 235 because, as I said earlier, the movie was meant to derive from the consciousness of the character and not so much from the thematics or the thematic imparts of the story, of like it being a neorealist this or a poor that. Once we made those decisions at the very beginning, it just became from beat to beat, what is Chiron feeling? And the best place I can illustrate that is in the swimming scene, the middle of the world, where Mahershala is teaching Alex Hibbert how to swim. We thought we'd have a lot more time to shoot that scene, but I'm from Miami, so I can read the weather. And we got to the beach, and I could see from the clouds that this massive storm system was going to be on top of us within like 90 minutes, 2 hours. But we're working from this idea that we want the image to be rooted in the consciousness of the character. So if you look at that scene or any of the stills, you see that Alex Hibbert's, he's like flat on his back. His ear is half in the water, half out. His body is half in the water, half out. The lens is also half in the water, half out. And so when you make choices like that, just at the very beginning, big bullet point, consciousness of the character, immersive cinema, within 90 minutes, you just make choices based on that, and you get this thing where you guys are in the water with those two characters. You're watching a black man teach a young black boy how to swim in the Atlantic Ocean, which we know about black bodies in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's just meant to be, I think, you make those very simple, big choices, and then you get on the day, and you just got to roll with it. So, yeah, it's kind of like that.
Phenomenal. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brett.
Question on this side?
Hey guys, so you'd mentioned the code of masculinity several times, and obviously it's a major theme of the film. I'm wondering if you could screen the film for one of two groups, which would benefit more, those who typically enforce the code, or those who have to switch within it?
Ooh, man. See, we have this, not this problem in this country, but based on the election, we have this thing where people on one side get together and talk about things, people on the other side get together and talk about things. They never cross and talk about things together. So I would want both sides of that group, let's take half from this side, put them in the same room, sit them next to each other, like checkers, red checker, black checker, red checker, black checker. And then turn to your neighbor, as they say in church, shake a hand and speak. That's what I would do.
Thank you.
Hi, so early in the evening you were talking about the timing of the film and how that was sort of divine. I thought it was interesting in that it followed Birth of a Nation, and I think by all measures that was probably a PR nightmare for the studio. One of the things that was coming out of those conversations was apparently statements that Nate Parker made about that he would never play a role that would emasculate him. And seeing how well this film was received, does this film somehow sort of play into Hollywood will only embrace films of people of color that are, I guess they would define as non-threatening?
Two parts. So one, I've never seen Nate say that. I've never seen the supposed video that exists, so I'm not gonna speak to that because I just haven't seen it, you know? On the flip side, it's funny, this movie's being framed as a Hollywood film, and I remember writing the script of the movie you guys saw, and there was no Hollywood involved. Now, Plan B came on board, and then A24. I think those companies are kind of like these outsider kind of companies, but you know, nobody ever told myself or Terrell, you know, what image to project or what story to tell. You know, nobody ever touched the script, you know, but myself and Terrell. And the movie is just, it has this fidelity to my life and Terrell's life growing up in this one particular neighborhood. You know, Hollywood's a very small place. This movie's made, you know, and I don't like to talk box office, but this very small film has made, I don't know, $9 million at this point, you know. There's not $9 million worth of people in Hollywood who are watching this film. It's people everywhere but Hollywood who have been supporting it. So I don't see this idea of like this Hollywood boogeyman pushing Moonlight to fill the space of non-threatening this or that. I actually think the world I grew up in is quite a bit threatening for the characters who live in it. And so I know I'm trying to unpack your question in a certain way, but I think I'm ending up at this whole different place. Is that, I mean, talk to me, bro.
No. It wasn't necessarily, it wasn't so much about, and I guess when you say Hollywood pushing it, I wasn't necessarily looking at it that way. I was looking at, I guess, media to a certain extent. And you guys spoke of the awards that you won. I sort of felt it was incredible. And so you were certainly more than worthy of all of those awards. But I'm talking about how it's being received by media and the general market.
Well, I mean, the general market, again, is very, the general market, you mean the audience or what?
The audience, yes.
Yeah, I mean, look at this room. This is a crazy diverse group of people. I don't know that these group of people all got together outside and decided, we're all gonna love this film because it's non-threatening or because it's this or that, you know? If I was born, you know, in the Northeast, maybe I would have made Manchester by the Sea. I could only make images, which is an amazing film that has fidelity to those guys' experience. I can only make what I know and what Terrell know, what I experienced, what Terrell experienced. And I just love that people have been willing to sit down and watch and empathize and see themselves in the piece. But I don't think there's any agenda in people seeing themselves in the piece or in the movie succeeding, which I think is what you're getting at.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything untoward happening, Brent.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
We just have time for 2 more questions, so we'll do one on each side. Sorry we can't get to all of you. Sorry about that.
I really liked what, Naomie, you said about the movie going straight past the intellect and into the emotions, because I feel like it really operated on that level. And there was one scene where the middle, I guess this is when he was Chiron, the middle kid. He spends the night at Teresa's house, and then he gets harassed the next day for spending time with her. And instead of going to her house, he sleeps in the train. And for me, that scene just said so much, and I think you just mentioned here that it was about how the world transforms these characters, and it was almost like he had this safe space, and when I watched it, I was like, what is he doing? Like, he has this safe space. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about, I understand it more now based on what you said, but I'd like to hear what you think about sort of his inability to take in all that he was being offered.
Yeah, there's a couple different things. I want to talk about Teresa, the character played by Naomie first, which is, again, in the place Terrell and I grew up in, there was always some place to go. You know, if there wasn't food, if the drawer was locked, you could go somewhere. You go to the candy lady house, you go to the frozen cup lady house, something. You get a frozen cup, you get a couple cookies. You can go somewhere.
I know about the frozen cup, I'm from New Orleans.
See, there you go. You can go somewhere, and I wanted this idea that there's always somewhere you can go, but you have to go home the next day. Teresa knows she has to send him back to Paula, because that's his mom, you know? That's why she says, you know, that your play mom and put something in your hand, you know? I think as a young man, though, at some point you go, I can't keep going to Teresa's house, you know? I would rather go on the train than receive pity, you know? So I think Sharon is trying to sort of be self-sustainable, you know? But eventually you do that so much, you know, you bury so much, you eat so much shit, you know, that it has to come out somewhere, which comes out with that chair. So yeah, it was sort of, again, just about representing what Terrell and I lived.
Thank you. Last question over here. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Carmen. It's more of a comment than a question. I just want to thank you, Barry, for showing the intimacy, the sensuality and the intimacy, unspoken. The way that was transpired is just, it was so beautiful.
Thank you.
In the true definition of beauty. I mean, and to show men being, the intimacy, it's very, you know, America doesn't see that. You know, they just don't see it. And you put that across without even using the words, which I thought was brilliant.
Thank you. I have to tip my hat to these
You
guys.
know what, all the actors, they were just like, thank you so much. And it is a movie that, you know, tell a friend, because let me tell you, it went just like that.
Hey,
Yo, you see Moonlight?
That is my line.
Got to see Moonlight.
Hey, all y'all. Hey, all you people on Facebook, where's the thing?
Thank you.
Tell a friend, please. Like, don't believe the hype. Like I said, we are in Coach. This is a small film. Tell a friend. Tell a friend.
And we've got Facebook out there, but we're here in Brooklyn. And so my last question for you is about your next project, because the author Colson Whitehead lives about a mile away from here, and I think he's done a few book launches here. The news is that you're working on an adaptation of Underground Railroad, right? That's a big film.
We're doing it as a limited series, actually.
Yeah, a limited series.
Yeah, because I wanna take the time and the space, you know, to tell the story at the pace of the character. You know, Cora goes through a lot in that book, and I want to show it all. You know, I want to show all the richness. You know, sometimes it's romance, sometimes it's horror. I want to lean into all of it. You know, and I have to speed through it. So.
We got to get the Brooklyn author in there. These performances are incredible, and we're just so lucky to have you here with us today. We really appreciate your time. Thank all of you, and thank all of you for coming.
Thank you, guys.